Okay, this is another attempt to try to record this lecture. This lecture I'm giving in Michigan in 2 weeks, and I thought I'd rehearse it. If you want to watch it, fine. If you don't want to watch it, fine. But I'm rehearsing. So this is called The Labor of Old Astrologiens, which is a line from Chaucer, The Labor of Old Astrologers. And I'm talking about the Kalendar of Shepherds, which is a book I've been working on for many years. Medieval astrology, as everyone knows, was rather hazily regarded as a science, though often with magical applications. There are extensive references in the works of both Geoffrey Chaucer and John Gower to astrological influence, and representations of astrological signs regularly appear in the calendar pages of books of hours from manuscript to print. A combination of pseudoscience with religious practice appears in many works, among them the Kalendar of Shepherds, a huge compendium that presents religious instruction along with the wisdom and lore of shepherds. A miscellany of tables for finding the dates of movable feasts, descriptions of the torments of purgatory, and the explications of the Ten Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, and the Apostles' Creed, along with medical and other practical information deriving from treatises on health, anatomy, and phlebotomy. The Shepherd's Calendar is heavily illustrated. The pictures in the English editions are derived from woodcut models in the French editions, printed first by Guy Marchand and then published by Antoine Verrard. Copies were owned in France and England by aristocratic and middle-class readers. In the English prologues, the emphasis is on the religious instruction the calendar provides. Richard Pinson, for example, rather sniffily critiques the impenetrable English translation of his predecessor Antoine Verrard. Obviously hired someone to do this translation who didn't really speak English, and clearly Verrard didn't really speak much either, by saying that his volume has been newly translated. I'm just going to go over the end of this quote. Pinson, and such as longeth to him, has made it into plain English, to the intent that every man may understand it, that this book is very profitable both for clerks and lay people, to cause them to have great understanding, and in especial in that we be bound to learn and know, on pain of everlasting death. Shepherd's lore, the governance of health, the astrological tables and moon charts, and the zodiacal signs within the book's pages are not mentioned here, but are consigned quite perfunctorily to the table of contents. However, as I noted in 2003, when writing about the Calendar of Shepherds in the Yearbook of English Studies, the calendar and astronomical charts are wrapped around the many religious, devotional, and memento mori texts, like newspaper around fish and chips, the religious matter being central and integral to the whole. In her excellent recent study of woodcuts in medical and astrological texts, Andrea van Leerdam observes that this is not the case in the Dutch editions, dating from 1511, nor in the German ones, dating from 1519, which continued to be published through the 17th century. These completely omit religious material and are oriented almost exclusively toward astrology and medicine. Why this is, in books printed just a bit after, and sometimes simultaneously with the English editions, is anyone's guess. One of the more interesting references in the calendar is to the wooden tablets made by shepherds, presumably to track time and seasons, which has led me down some very curious rabbit holes. After tackling this first, I shall move on to the astrological lore in the calendar, which certainly verges on magical and predictive, otherwise known as hokum, and then consider Zodiac Man, who is familiar to most of us from books of hours and other kinds of texts. There's not time to discuss the religious texts in any detail, other than to emphasize that the calendar was conceived as a whole home encyclopedia that includes not only how to avoid the pain of everlasting death, but also descriptions of astrological features, the power of stars on human experience, prognostication and zodiacal influence on personality and health. From the Pinson version of the calendar, we learn that shepherds are illiterate. They have no manner of learning, but record their observations by figures, which is graved in small tables of wood. And then goes on that this Calendar of Shepherds was taken from this kind of text. This present calendar of the shepherds, the which is drawn out of their compote and calendar in writing. This passage has been lifted more or less wholesale from the Paris edition of Guy Marchand for Jean Petit, printed on January 7th in 1496-7, which again refers to the reading of the heavens by unlettered shepherds who record their observations, quote, by means of some figures that they make in little wooden tablets. What could these be? When I was studying materials relating to the Calendar of Shepherds in the Morgan Library, Roger Wick very kindly brought out what he called an oddity, and it is. This is Morgan, manuscript M1099, a runic calendar with figures incised on bone or ivory that was purportedly made in Hainaut about 1510 to 1530. The feasts in the calendar are represented by pictographs. Carefully turning the 10 leaves of this book, I observed St. George slaying a dragon, Longinus with his spear, a scene of Christ before Pilate, St. Gregory the Great robed as a pope with tiara and carrying a processional cross, a Madonna and child, various apostles, Christ with his orb, and the Annunciation in which the angelic scroll is incised in runic. There is also a figure of St. Peter with keys and possibly St. Catherine with her wheel, though it looks more like a bread roll on a string. First line of runes has the days of the month with repeating Dominical letters which were used to find the dates on which Sunday falls, and the second line lists the sequence of the golden numbers that aid in finding the date of Easter in a given year. Is this meant to replicate a shepherd's wooden calendar, or is it something else entirely? Who is it for? Was the impulse antiquarian? Was it a copy of a Scandinavian calendar, though it has some saints that are local to England and the Low Countries in it? Runic is often associated with the magical. As Michael P. Barnes comments, quote, like all writing systems, the runic could be and was employed to set down magic formulas and sundry types of hocus pocus, though that may not be the purpose of the runes here. There are a number of these runic calendars still in existence, which are described by Carlo Cucina in her Libri Runici del Computo. Otherwise, they are unstudied. Cucina lists several examples of rune books that are extant in Bologna, Berlin, Copenhagen, Paris, and the Martin Schoyen collection in the Vatican. They are almost always made by Norse writers in Scandinavia, however. Cucina does cite the reference to the wooden tables made by shepherds that appears in the calendar as a possible motivation for making rune books, and states further that European calendar models appear to be replicated sometimes without the expected updates. I'm skipping a bit. The product very evidently responds to a widespread demand for portable wooden computing sticks or little pocket-sized perpetual calendars of every shape and size, written, painted, or carved. Cucina here seems to suggest that runic calendars were copied and recopied without necessarily being updated to meet a continuing market for them, and that these objects had cachet even when printed almanacs begin to be produced. If the Morgan rune calendar is an example of this, we might possibly, you can see the Annunciation there on the lower right-hand corner with the angel speaking in runic to Mary. I wonder if she understood that. All right, if the rune calendar is an example of this, we might possibly connect it to the calendars carved in wood by shepherds, as Cucina seems to, though the runic lettering suggests a type of literacy unusual in the 16th century in continental Europe. Another book in the Morgan that might tangentially be relevant to this idea that shepherds or illiterate people made portable calendars in wood is this printed roll, which is again very odd. The roll has been made xylographically, that is, it has been printed from wood blocks, not with movable type, and is hand painted. Like the rune calendar, there are golden numbers here for calculating the date of Easter. On the recto is a chart that moves from the creation of the world to the coronation of kings and depictions of saints, including Peter, Margaret, David, Gregory, Edward, Anne, shown with the baby Jesus and Mary, and Petronilla, along with the archangel Michael. On the verso are the labors of the months, along with sun diagrams that indicate the amount of daylight one might experience month by month. The roll was apparently made in England about 1530 by someone called MS, whose initials appear within a roundel on the roll. The images and brief text were originally incised in wood, then printed on this handy roll that could easily be put into a pocket or a purse. Calendars like these, while not magical in and of themselves, could also be used to calculate astrological projections concerning the weather, health, physiognomy, and human character. Like the runic and xylographic calendars, the Calendar of Shepherds has a number of charts, including charts to find the dominical and golden numbers, and a chart with the labors of the months and seasons. This is derived from one printed by Matthias Huss in his French translation of Bartholomæus Anglicus in 1491-1492 to introduce Book 9 on the passage of time. In Huss, the central medallion is labeled day and night, with scenes of the labors of the months in the outer circle, and that's presumably spring on the top and winter on the bottom, the man kind of warming his hands at the fire. The Calendar of Shepherds has lost the text and added the zodiacal signs, and is still readable, as we see here with more or less the same details. A copy printed by De Word in 1495 in his English Bartholomæus edition has lost the sense of the central medallion. It's hard to make out what that man is doing in the lower register. An inexact copy of the Huss image that still serves its purpose. Though the specific details disappear in subsequent copies, the picture continues to be used. Other charts in the Calendar of Shepherds are used for purposes of determining the effects of the stars, constellations, and zodiac signs on human character and physiognomy. After this woodcut of the circles of the meridians, the two great circles, the one is of the meridian, the text addresses the properties of various stars and constellations. For example, Andromeda, described here as a fixed star, not a constellation, rules Aries, which is described as a hot, dry sign that rules the head. It is further said that those born under this sign may die in prison unless there was another more beneficent planet in their chart. After discussion of all the signs with their ruling stars, there is this verse, and I'll just summarize that. Aries is good, Taurus is not. Gemini and Cancer will make you glad, but fiercely beware of Leo and Virgo. Libra, for friendship, full secretive, is Scorpio. Sagittarius is good, Capricorn, dangerous. Aquarius, by water, as proven by gentle clerks. Not sure I know what that means exactly. But best is Pisces and most bountiful. In the physiognomy of the shepherds, there are descriptions of how physical features are indicators of character. Among these, one finds that a great plenty of hair betokeneth in woman boisterousness and covetousness, and a great voice in a woman is an evil sign. A sweet voice betokeneth a person full of envy and suspicion and full of leasings or lies. Though we learn today, ideally, to look beyond appearances, thick, full hair or loud, sweet voices in women were taken as signs of innately flawed character. In the section on astrology, there are profiles of personalities of both men and women by sign. For example, the Scorpio woman is amiable and fair and shall not be long with her first husband, but after she shall rejoice with another, and by his good and faithful service she shall have honor and victory over her enemies. Her lucky days are Tuesday and Saturday, worthy of a newspaper horoscope. There's also a section on planetary influence at the time of birth. When a child is born, it is to be known at what hour, and if it be in the beginning of the hour, in the midst, or at the end. If a child is born at the beginning of the day, she will have the qualities of that day and the day before. While if she is born at the end of the day, she will have the qualities of that day and the day after. If a child is born on Sunday, for example, he will be prudent and wise, a great speaker, and that which he praiseth he holdeth virtues in himself. Children born on Monday will have high foreheads, ruddy complexions, and a merry visage. They will also be pious. Those born on Tuesdays are liars, thieves, deceivers, and physically large, while those born on Wednesday are well-bearded, subtle, mild, veritable, and most prudent. Jupiter's children born on Thursday are hardy, beautiful, and vagabonds. Does this mean they will travel? Those born on Friday are loved of every man, while Saturday's child is courteous, will not be avaricious, but will have a short life. This type of prognostication has perhaps come down to us in the rhyme recorded by Mrs. Anna Bray in the 19th century. Another discussion of planetary influence on human character follows and seems somewhat contradictory. Those born under Saturn, for example, will be false, envious, and full of chiding and full of law. They will overindulge in meat and bread with a stinking breath and be heavy, thoughtful, and malicious, yet they will be wise in counseling. Physically, they will have little eyes, black hair, and great lips. Jupiter's children are gracious, wealthy, but full of cunning. They will pursue peace, but also the dark arts. They are desirous to know the virtue of precious stones and the art of necromancy. These people have great eyes and great brows, curling hair, and great nostrils. They will not talk behind people's backs, and will particularly love the colors gray and green, and have gold and silver plenty, and love to sing and to be honestly merry. As one might expect, lechers are born under the sign of Venus, who love fair women and gay clothes, gay jewels, and fair flowers, but much folk shall love him, and he will not swear, but it shall be true. While those born under Mercury have quite contradictory personality traits again. They are subtle of wit, and shall be of good governance. For women he shall have blame, and he shall not set by marriage. He will love ladies, and he should be a good man of the church and religious. He shall gather great good, and be crafty in rhetoric, philosophy, and geometry. He shall love all manner instruments of music, and a cloth maker. He shall have a high forehead and a long face. This sort of prognostication describing physical traits as well as character may derive from popular physiognomy texts like the Book of Physiognomy, which circulated from the Middle Ages well beyond into the 16th century. Finally, we come to Zodiac Man. In the Morgan, there is an almanac and calendar with thunder prognostications made in 1433, about which Kurt Buehler and others have written. This was formerly a roll, but is now a manuscript comprised of 3 pieces of parchment. Prognostication by thunder was a popular predictive text in England and elsewhere from the 7th century on. The Kalendar of Shepherds also includes verses and predictions based on thunder patterns. And by the way, thunder is not always a bad sign. It has differing significance according to month. We are told, for example, if it thunders in November, it betokeneth abundance of fruits and mirth among folk, while in December the sound of thunder means an abundance of corn and peace and accord in the people. On folio 2 of this manuscript is a figure of Zodiac Man, who is used as a healing and bloodletting guide. He is surrounded by labeled medallions with representations of astrological signs to indicate the area of the body governed by that sign. For example, Aries rules the head, Taurus the neck, and so on. Just below Zodiac Man in this roll is an astrological diagram with a portrait of Christ in the center, wearing a cross-rayed nimbus, a visual mix of religion and astrology. The Zodiac Man appears elsewhere in English manuscripts. For example, in Ashmole 391, the Calendarium of John Summer, a Franciscan friar of Oxford, which was written in 1380 and dedicated to Joan, Princess of Wales, and about whom Lynn Mooney has so comprehensively written. As many of you know, Geoffrey Chaucer cites Summer by name in his treatise on the astrolabe. Zodiac Man then makes his way into print and appears along with a woodcut of Vain Man, a phlebotomy chart, in the Kalendar of Shepherds, both drawn from the Marchand edition. He also appears in books of hours, seen as an accompaniment to the calendars in those books, and useful to those who, like some who trawl the internet these days, wanted guidance on home health care. The diagram indicates which body part is most vulnerable to wounds and should not be bled during the period of a particular astrological sign. In almanacs, calendars, and in the shepherd's calendar, zodiac man is to be read alongside a moon table, or figure for to know in what sign the moon is in every day. This has further instructions that advise the reader to mark well first the letter of the calendar, on the day that you have, and then look out the said letter in the figure here above in the line descending under the golden number. Then look at the head of the lines whereas is written the name of the signs. In other words, the moon chart is to be used in conjunction with the chart of golden numbers in the calendar to sort out exactly where the moon is according to astrological sign. The calendar cautions further that, quote, a man ought not to make incision, they touch with iron, the member governed of any sign, the day that the moon is in it, for fear of too great effusion of blood that might happen. Nay, and likewise also when the sun is in it, for the danger and peril that might ensue. The moon was believed to rule the humors in the body, including blood, causing them to flow more freely. The moon table, read in conjunction with the zodiac man diagram, would help one to practice caution about wounds or bleeding a body part when the moon was in a particular astrological sign. Charts like these allowed owners of a book of hours or an almanac to calculate the sign position of the moon and to check instantly whether that was linked to any cited illness affecting them. In this talk, we have seen how several of these images move from place to place. Their use variable from magical practice like prognostication or description of astrological influence on character, or to determining the season or the days on which Sunday or Easter falls. And some illustrations continue into the 21st century. For example, a related figure of Zodiac Man and a moon chart appear in the 2024 Farmer's Almanac. In this modern almanac, Zodiac Man is called the Man of Many Seasons and is shown with the same zodiacal signs as in medieval manuscripts and early printed versions, and with captions specifying which zodiac sign governs which body part, along with the dates for those signs. The picture caption explains that, quote, astrologers associate the signs of the zodiac with specific parts of the body, believing that these signs have an effect on those parts. The dates listed are the sun's place in each astrological sign. Facing this is a moon chart, which gives the moon's placement, just as we saw in the medieval examples. According to the man of many signs, the sun is currently in Taurus, ruler of the neck, while the moon on May 9th, 2024, that is today, is in Gemini, a sign that governs the arms. We should therefore take special care of those body parts today. For a last modern example, there is an exhibition currently on at the Grolier Club titled Language, Decipherment, and Translation, which features the work of Laura Davidson, an artist who published a series of linoleum prints in a book called Useful Knowledge in 1998. She's interested in images, not as didactic, instructive, religious, or magical, but as, quote, purely visual objects to experience rather than something to be read to be understood. Here the image stands alone, presented simply because it is beautiful. And yet we can see that this is a zodiacal chart, an astrological diagram, a contemporary heir of the many astrological charts that preceded it. Thank you. Now, how does this thing stop? This is a question. How do we stop it? Stop, stop, stop. Goodbye. Thank you. Okay. What happened? Where is it? Ooh. No, don't record now. Stop.